To my daughter Vile, my mother said, lifting her wine glass with shaking hands, for saving Eli's life. Everyone at the table applauded. I just stared at her. 3 nights earlier, I was the one crawling through broken glass on the highway, pulling my 6-year-old son out of a crushed SUV while he wasn't breathing. Vile had vanished before the ambulance even arrived. But now my family was calling her a hero. I pushed my chair back so hard it slammed into the wall. That's not what happened. A hand grabbed my wrist. The room went silent as Dr. Heller stepped inside holding a thick crash report folder. He looked straight at my sister first, then at me. And the next words out of his mouth made Vile stop breathing. We finished reconstructing the accident, he said quietly, and someone here lied about that night. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Nobody moved. The only sound in my parents' dining room was the soft buzz from the chandelier overhead and Eli's cartoon, playing faintly in the living room down the hall. Vile recovered first. She gave this shaky little laugh and wiped at the corner of her eye like she was still emotional from the toast. Doctor, this really isn't the time. But Dr. Heller didn't smile back. He stayed standing near the doorway, one hand gripping the file against his chest. His coat was still damp from the rain outside. My mother lowered her wine glass slowly. What exactly is going on? I looked around the table. My father wouldn't look at me at all. He was focused on cutting his steak into tiny pieces like this was any normal family dinner. Vile's husband, Nolan, looked pale enough to pass out. And my sister. She kept twisting the ring on her finger over and over. That's when my stomach started turning. Because Vile only did that when she was scared. 3 days, that's how long Eli had been in the hospital. 3 days of sleeping upright in plastic chairs. 3 days of listening to machines breathe for my son, while doctors warned me about swelling in his lungs. And through all of it, my parents barely asked how I was holding up. Every conversation somehow circled back to Vile. How terrifying that must have been for her. She acted so fast. She saved him. I told myself none of it mattered as long as Eli survived. But sitting there watching my family celebrate her, while the cuts on my arms were still stitched shut. Something inside me started cracking. Dr. Heller stepped farther into the room and placed the folder carefully on the table, beside the untouched birthday cake my mother had bought for Eli. Only nobody had sung for Eli yet. The entire night had become about my sister. I didn't come here to accuse anyone unfairly, the doctor said calmly, but the reconstruction report raises serious concerns. My father finally looked up. Concerns about what? Dr. Heller opened the file. And Vile suddenly stood so fast her chair scraped hard across the floor. Don't, she said. Not to the doctor. To me. Don't, she said again, staring directly at me this time. Her voice was low, tight, almost warning me. I felt my pulse hammering in my throat. Dr. Heller glanced between us before slowly pulling a few papers from the folder. I think everyone deserves clarity about what happened that night. My mother let out an irritated sigh. Eli just came home from the hospital. Why are we doing this now? Because insurance investigators completed their review this afternoon, Dr. Heller replied, and some details don't match the statements given at the scene. The room tightened instantly. Vile crossed her arms. You're making this sound criminal. Nobody answered her. I sat back down slowly, trying to steady my breathing. Across the table, Nolan rubbed both hands over his face without saying a word. That scared me more than anything. Because Nolan always defended Vile. Always. Growing up, she had been the center of everything in our family. Straight-A student, cheer captain, the daughter my parents bragged about to strangers in grocery store lines. Meanwhile, I was the difficult one, after getting pregnant at 27 and raising Eli alone after his father disappeared. Even now, my parents paid part of Vile's mortgage, while I worked double shifts at the rehab clinic just to cover rent. So when they immediately believed she'd saved Eli, part of me hated how unsurprised I was. Dr. Heller adjusted his glasses and looked down at the report. Emergency responders found Maureen outside the vehicle holding Eli. My father frowned, obviously after Vile got him out. The doctor didn't react. Instead, he turned one page slowly. Then why, he asked carefully, was Vile found nearly 50 yards from the SUV when officers arrived? The question hit the table like broken glass. Vile's face tightened instantly. I was looking for help. But suddenly, I remembered something clearly. Rain pouring down. Smoke rising from the hood. Me screaming Eli's name. And Vile's voice somewhere in the dark. Not calling for help. Talking on the phone. Dr. Heller lifted another photograph from the file. Eli's clothing contained embedded safety glass fragments consistent with extraction through the rear passenger window, he said quietly, meaning someone physically pulled him through shattered glass after the collision. He paused, then looked directly at my sister, and based on the injuries, he said that person wasn't Vile. He slid the photograph across the table. Fresh cuts covered both of my forearms in the image. And for the first time all night, nobody spoke. Nobody at the table touched their food after that. My mother stared at the photograph like she didn't recognize the arms in it. Deep red cuts ran from my wrists to my elbows. Tiny pieces of glass still clung to my skin. I'd barely noticed the pain that night. All I remembered was Eli turning blue in the back seat. Vile suddenly pushed her chair away from the table. "This is insane," she snapped. Maureen was hysterical after the crash. Her memory isn't reliable. I looked at her in disbelief. Hysterical, I repeated. Eli wasn't breathing. And I was trying to help. Dr. Heller spoke before either of us could continue. Actually, investigators reviewed nearby highway traffic footage. The room froze again. Vile's eyes widened for half a second before she caught herself. "It's blurry," she said quickly. "You can't prove anything from traffic cameras." "The footage is limited," Dr. Heller agreed, "but timestamps are very clear." He opened the file again. "The collision occurred at 9:14 p.m. Your sister exited the passenger side at 9:14 and 11 seconds. He looked directly at Vile. Then she moved away from the vehicle immediately. I felt my chest tighten, because suddenly pieces of that night started reconnecting in my head. I remembered choking on smoke while trying to force the crushed back door open. I remembered screaming Vile's name over and over. And I remembered seeing her silhouette farther down the shoulder of the highway, instead of beside us. My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough," she was in shock. "No," Dr. Heller said calmly. "Shock doesn't explain the phone records." Vile went completely pale. Nolan finally looked up sharply. "Doctor." "Phone activity shows active texting seconds before impact," Dr. Heller continued. "The vehicle drifted across 2 lanes before striking the barrier." My mother covered her mouth. Vile started crying instantly. I looked away for 1 second. But nobody rushed to comfort her this time. Not even my father. I stared at my sister across the table, feeling something colder than anger settle into my stomach. Because if she caused the crash, then everything after mattered even more. And Dr. Heller still hadn't closed the file. "The texting caused the accident," he said quietly. Then he paused. "But that isn't why investigators recommended criminal review." "What do you mean criminal review?" my mother whispered. Nobody even looked at the food anymore. The candles beside Eli's untouched cake had burned almost completely down, wax spilling across the tablecloth. Vile's crying stopped instantly. Not softened. Stopped. Like fear had replaced it too fast for tears. Dr. Heller reached into the folder again and removed a printed transcript. Investigators recovered deleted voice messages from Vile's phone through cloud backup. Nolan closed his eyes. That tiny reaction hit me harder than anything else so far. Because he already knew. One message, Dr. Heller continued, was sent less than 2 minutes after the collision. Vile shook her head violently. "No. The doctor read anyway. I can't go near the car. If it catches fire, I'm done. I can't lose everything over this. Silence crashed over the room. I felt the air leave my lungs. Not because I was surprised anymore, because hearing it out loud made it real. My mother stared at Vile like she was looking at a stranger. You left them. Vile immediately pointed at me. I thought she had him. You heard me screaming, I shouted. The words exploded out of me before I could stop them. For the first time that night, my voice shook harder than my hands. You heard me begging for help while Eli was trapped. My father stood abruptly. Maureen. No. I turned toward him, years of swallowed anger boiling over all at once. I cut my arms open pulling metal off your grandson, while she stood outside worrying about herself. Vile covered her face. I was scared. And Eli was, I shot back. Nobody defended her this time. Not even our father. Dr. Heller waited until the room quieted again before speaking. There's more. My stomach dropped. He looked directly at Vile. Emergency services were not contacted by anyone inside the vehicle. I blinked at him. What? A passing truck driver made the 911 call after seeing Maureen carrying Eli onto the shoulder. The room erupted again. My mother started crying openly now. Nolan pushed his chair back from the table, so suddenly it nearly tipped over. And Vile. She just sat there frozen. Dr. Heller slowly pulled one final document from the folder. I came personally tonight because investigators finalized their recommendation this afternoon, he said. Then he placed the paper in front of her. Police are preparing charges. Vile stared down at the document without touching it. Her voice barely came out. What charges? Vile's voice sounded small now, nothing like the confident woman my parents spent their whole lives protecting. Dr. Heller didn't hesitate. Reckless driving resulting in bodily injury, he said evenly, child endangerment, and obstruction concerns related to deleted communications after the crash. My mother gasped softly. My father looked like someone had drained the blood from his body. But Dr. Heller still wasn't finished. The investigation also found evidence that the false story about Vile rescuing Eli was knowingly allowed to spread. He slid another printed page across the table. Text messages. Vile's messages. My eyes locked onto one line immediately. If everyone thinks I pulled him out, they'll go easier on me. My stomach turned. For days she'd watched people praise her. Watched my parents celebrate her. Watched me sit silently while stitches pulled at my arms every time I moved. And she said nothing. Nolan finally spoke, barely above a whisper. You told me nobody would ever see those messages. Vile looked at him desperately. Nolan, please. You asked me to delete them. The room went dead silent again. My mother lowered herself slowly into her chair like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Oh my God. I stared at my sister across the table, and suddenly the anger that had been carrying me all night started collapsing into something heavier. Exhaustion. Grief. 3 nights in that hospital replayed through my head all at once. Eli hooked to oxygen. Doctors warning me about fluid in his lungs. Me sitting awake at 4 in the morning counting every breath he took, because I was terrified the next one wouldn't come. And meanwhile, my family had been calling someone else his hero. I looked at my parents. You never even asked me what happened. Neither of them answered. You saw my injuries, you saw me sleeping in a hospital chair, and you still toasted her. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. My mother started crying harder. Maureen, we didn't know. You didn't want to know. That landed hard because it was true. All their lives, believing Vile had always been easier. Dr. Heller quietly closed the folder. Detectives will likely contact everyone involved by tomorrow. Nolan grabbed his coat immediately. Vile looked panicked now. You're leaving. He stared at her for a long moment before answering. You left a child in a wrecked car. Then he walked out. No one stopped him. A week later, the entire story had spread through our extended family. Vile lost 2 major clients from her real estate business almost immediately after news of the investigation circulated. Friends stopped answering her calls. My parents barely spoke to her except through attorneys. And for the first time in my life, nobody was protecting her anymore. A few days after the dinner, I sat beside Eli during physical therapy while he practiced walking without getting tired. He looked so small in that oversized hospital hoodie. Halfway across the room, he stopped and looked back at me. "Mom." I smiled carefully. "Yeah." His little voice softened. "You saved me, right?" Everything inside me broke at once. I nodded, tears finally slipping down my face after holding them back for days. "I wasn't leaving you." Eli walked back over and wrapped his arms around me carefully because of the healing cuts on mine. And through the therapy room window, I watched 2 detectives escort Vile across the hospital parking lot while she kept her head down and avoided everyone's eyes. This time, nobody followed her.